I had. My voice shook the room as I snapped, demanding that he shut up. I accused him of overreacting, of whining like a child, and worst of all, I took my sister's side without hesitation. You need to get off her case. I spat, my frustration boiling over. The moment those words left my mouth, I saw something in Larry shift, his expression twisted in disbelief, his anger dissolving into something far worse, hurt. He stared at me as if I had just become a stranger. "Did you really just say that?" he asked, his voice quiet now, like he was hoping he had misheard me. But I didn't back down. In fact, I made it worse. Fueled by my own stubbornness and the need to defend my sister, I doubled down. "If you can't handle this, maybe you should just pack your bags and leave." Silence fell over the room. Our friends, who had been witnessing the entire thing, exchanged uneasy glances. My sister said nothing, just lay there, unaffected as if none of this involved her. Larry didn't say another word. He just looked at me, a mix of sadness and resignation in his eyes. Then, without arguing, without slamming doors, without giving me the fight I had been expecting, he simply walked away. At first, I convinced myself that he would return, that after cooling off, he'd realize I didn't mean it. But as the minutes turned to hours and the hours stretched into days, the awful truth settled in. He was gone. I had told the person I loved most to leave, and he actually listened. People say you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone. I never truly understood how painfully accurate that was until I found myself staring at the empty space where Larry used to be, left with nothing but my own regret. Everyone laughed. Everyone except Larry. His expression remained unreadable, his eyes dark with unspoken emotions. At that moment, I should have realized that I had crossed a line, that the damage I had inflicted wasn't something a joke could fix. But I didn't. I brushed it off, thinking it was just another one of our little spats, something we'd move past like always. That night, however, I noticed a shift. Larry barely spoke to me, his usual warmth replaced by something distant and cold. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly became strained, his responses short and void of the humor I had fallen in love with. It was as if I had flipped a switch inside him, and he had quietly decided to shut me out. Looking back, I realized now that the birthday party was the moment everything truly unraveled. I had humiliated him in front of our friends, belittled him without even considering his side of things, and when given the opportunity to make it right, I chose mockery instead of remorse. The Larry I knew, the man who once made me laugh until my stomach hurt, who used to tease me in the most endearing ways, who looked at me like I was his whole world, began to disappear. And the worst part? I was too blind to see that I was the one pushing him away. I only blaming him? His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a sharpness I had never heard before. He wasn't just frustrated. He was done, but I didn't see it. I was too caught up in my anger, too determined to prove that I was right. I scoffed, rolling my eyes, and muttered something sarcastic under my breath. I could see my mother watching, a smirk playing on her lips as if she was enjoying every second of it. That should have been my wake-up call. But it wasn't. Larry didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He simply sighed, ran a hand through his hair, and walked away. Not just from the conversation, but from me. The rest of the night went by in a blur. I acted as if nothing had happened, laughing with my family, pretending I didn't care. But deep down, an uneasy feeling settled in my chest. The ride home was worse than the last time. At least then, there had been tension. This time, there was nothing, just silence. A hollow, suffocating kind of quiet that made me feel like I was sitting next to a stranger. I wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but I couldn't, because for the first time, I was afraid of what he might say back. I had blamed him entirely. He exhaled slowly, his eyes dark with realization. "I see it now," he muttered. "You and your mother, you're both out to sabotage me." Instead of diffusing the tension, my mother fueled it. She insisted that Larry could have caught my sister, but simply chose not to. That was the final straw. Disillusioned and disappointed beyond words, Larry shook his head and walked out of the house. That should have been the end of it. I should have let it go and waited until we were alone if I wanted to address anything. But I didn't. When we got home, Larry was waiting, his posture tense, his expression unreadable, like a predator sizing up its prey. His voice was controlled but firm. What was that back there? I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and not in the mood to argue. Dismissing him, I muttered, I don't have the energy for this ridiculous conversation. His eyes widened. Ridiculous? His voice was laced with disbelief. What exactly do you mean by that? I accused him of playing the victim, of twisting everything to make himself look innocent. I said he was nothing more than a manipulative coward. The argument escalated, our voices overlapping in a chaotic clash of accusations and denials. Neither of us would back down. It was the same fight on a loop, both of us unwilling to break free from the cycle. Then, suddenly, he just stopped. He didn't say another word. He just turned and walked out. For the next 2 days, we didn't speak. It was the longest silence our relationship had ever endured. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was suffocating. Then Brittany showed up. She barely stepped inside before sensing the thick tension hanging in the air. Without missing a beat, she suggested we go to a party, claiming we both needed a break. Neither of us had the energy to pretend to be social, but Brittany was relentless. I had no intention of going, but then something unexpected happened. Larry, who had spent the last 2 days completely avoiding me, suddenly asked, "Who's going?" I froze. Was he actually considering this? Brittany, quick to seize the opportunity, started listing off the names of his closest friends. I saw the shift in his posture, the subtle nod, the quiet okay. And just like that, he was going. Brittany turned to me expectantly, but I stood my ground. I'm not in the mood, I said firmly. I watched as Larry got ready. Brittany kept trying to convince me, but I refused to budge. And then, before I knew it, they were gone. Together at first, I tried to ignore it. I stayed home, telling myself it didn't matter. But my mind betrayed me, replaying images of them at the party, talking, laughing, drinking. Then, my thoughts took a darker turn. Brittany used to have a thing for Larry. She had claimed she was over it. But what if she wasn't? What if this was her chance? That thought alone was enough to send me into a spiral. I jumped up, threw on an outfit, and rushed outside, only to find Larry's car still there. He left with her. My paranoia exploded. I grabbed my keys and sped to the party. When I got there, my worst fear was confirmed. Larry was in the middle of the room, drink in hand, laughing harder than he had in weeks. And Brittany? She was right beside him, smiling as if she belonged. Their rage ignited inside me. I stormed to the crowd and called his name, my voice sharp and commanding. The room quieted slightly. People turned to watch. He looked at me, confused, waiting for me to say something. I was shaking, not just with anger, but with something else, something deeper. Jealousy, fear, humiliation. Get up, I ordered. We're going home. Larry didn't move. I clenched my fists. I said, we're leaving. Still, he didn't budge. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and asked, or what? That was it. That was the moment I snapped. If you don't come home with me right now, I threatened, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear, you can pack your bags and never come back. Silence. Then Larry laughed. A deep, unsettling laugh that sent a chill down my spine. His expression turned cold, his eyes locking onto mine with finality. I've put up with you long enough. That was when everything changed. After the party, he didn't argue. He didn't yell. He simply looked at me and said, get out of my sight. We're done. I scoffed, convinced he was bluffing. When I got home, I packed his bags for him, expecting him to come crawling back, begging for another chance. Instead, when he returned, he took his things and left without hesitation. Panicked, I shouted after him, if you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. He paused for only a second before turning to me. His voice was calm, yet his words cut deeper than any scream ever could. Why would I come back to hell? And just like that, he was gone. Days passed. I waited for him to call, to show up, to fight for us. But he never did. A week turned into 2. Still nothing. Desperate, I found out where he was staying and went to see him. But before I could even get a full sentence out, he practically chased me away. his eyes filled with a rage I had never seen before. "I never want to see you again," he said. This was the same man who once swore he couldn't imagine a life without me. Now, he won't even look at me. Our mutual friends refuse to get involved. They know how furious he is. Even my own family has stopped trying. And now there's nothing left. No second chance. No hope. Just me, drowning in the weight of my own regret.